Thanks for tuning in to the HR Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Lucinda. The HR Uprising is focused on helping forward-thinking people professionals deliver real lasting value in their organisations. I'm a chartered psychologist, speaker and trainer, and recently authored the best-selling business book, How to Be a Change Superhero. My day job is founder and CEO of software and training business Actus. This gives me the opportunity to work with other businesses like yours. We are focused on building a better workplace for people wherever they are located, with the help of our performance, learning and talent management software and our training and consultancy services. Every week on the podcast, I will be covering different topics and challenges, joined by relevant experts and real-life people professionals. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoy and get value from this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's HR Uprising podcast. And today we're going to continue our CPO Chief People Officer series, and I'm so pleased to have Jeannette Crisp, who's the Director of People and Culture from the Duke of Edinburgh's Award. Jeanette, thank you for being with me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I feel very privileged to be part of this series.
Oh, it's so nice for people to be able to hear the different journeys that people have been on and the different roles that are out there, and different shapes of L&D, people in development, people in culture, and also the career journeys, really importantly. So you obviously work for the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, which is something that most people have heard of. Some people who are listening will have taken part in, or their kids may have. Do you want to explain a little bit about that role? You've been doing it, 3 years or so, haven't you?
Yes, just over 3 years or so now. So my role and the role of my team, I was classified as we're enablers within the charity. So it's a predominantly inward facing role, as in looking after the people that work for the Duke of Edinburgh's Award. And fundamentally, as I always say to my team, if we're doing our jobs right, it means all of those people that we employ that are working with our licensed organisations and fundamentally trying to do the best they can for the young people that undertake the award can do their jobs to best effect. So we've got an internal function that we look after payroll. So we've got an internal payroll systems part of our function, equity, diversity and inclusion, talent recruitment and onboarding, and then business partnering. So they're the key kind of functions that sit within my team.
And it's very much customer, isn't it, for you? So you're kind of enabling. It's not just those people who work in a private sector organisation where you're just kind of looking internally. You are impacting outside the charity as well through the work you do.
Absolutely. The work that we do, and I think one of the things that every single one of us that works for Duke of Edinburgh's Award recognises is the benefit that young people get from doing the award and the life skills and the confidence it gives them. And I think if we're doing our jobs right, then we're enabling more young people, and we're reaching out to more marginalised young people and enabling them to hopefully realise their potential.
So it's really quite a purposeful role, I guess, in terms of believing in the charity. It'd be interesting to go back and find out how this compares to other roles that you've done over your career. Just in terms of within this existing role, what sort of I suppose priorities have you had to take on since you've come in? What's been part of the strategy since you've been there?
When I joined Duke of Edinburgh's Award, I was about, I think, a year, maybe 18 months after Ruth Marvel had joined as chief executive. And this charity had undergone a complete change of focus in terms of the strategy. So we had our Youth Without Limits strategy. There wasn't a people strategy for the charity at the time I joined. So one of my first things that I did was to develop our people strategy. And within that, it was obviously about how do we do what we need to do for our people to, again, enable them to come to work, be their authentic selves, do the best job that they can do, and support our Youth Without Limits strategy. So we've had a number of key priorities within that and a number of fabulous things that we've been able to achieve during the course of the last 3 years as part of that strategy, from introducing new systems and processes, better ways of working, to a whole programme of staff engagement, leadership development. I look back on what we've achieved. We got our Investors in People Silver accreditation, I think a year after I joined, which was a real achievement for us.
No means feat, that. Yeah, well done. Yeah.
And we've got re-accreditation coming up this November. So fingers crossed we continue to demonstrate progression again.
Yes, and then going to the next level, because it's all about applying it and embedding it. It's definitely not something you just get a tick box, is it?
Absolutely not.
So the whole ability for you to come in and be strategic, and I think it is an interesting one, perhaps for us to go back through your career as to whether you've always been strategic or whether you developed it, because I know you've had lots of strategic level roles, and that's one of the things that often people starting out in their career, they're not quite sure what strategic is, or how can I do it, or can I do it? So I just wonder, tell us a little bit about your journey up into these more sort of strategic roles and how you developed those skills.
Sure. So I kind of almost fell into doing HR people stuff. When I went to university, I did a business studies degree because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I hadn't quite made up my mind. And I decided, and I'm going during the course of my degree, I realized I really liked people stuff. And I liked employment law, and I liked all of that, all of the nuances and the wonderful psychology that goes behind how people's brains work and what motivates people and gets them engaged. I was fortunate to then, straight out of university, get a job working in the NHS. So I started out my life in public sector, and I've predominantly stayed within that sector for most of my career. Not entirely sure which branch of people I wanted to be in. So I've done lots of different roles that have been around employee relations, have been around learning and development, have been around systems, payroll, reward, all sorts of bits and pieces. So for me, it was quite diverse, the range of different parts that I worked in, as I had the opportunity to progress. And a lot of that, I say originally, if you look at things like my LinkedIn profile, you'll see it was during, a lot of it's been in health. So I've worked in the health service in various component parts. And the more opportunities I've had to try and influence, the more I've realized how much I like to see that I can do things that make a difference. So being purposeful in terms of the organization I work for, but being purposeful in terms of being able to shape and influence how we interact and deal with our people has always been something that's been important to me. And so my ambition, I guess, has been to progress to roles where I can influence broader and in a wider scope, so that I've got more opportunity to create more opportunities and development for people within all the organizations I've worked in. Did I set out at the beginning of my career thinking one day I want to be a director in a well-known charity? No. Did I want to just be the best I could be in the role that I was doing at the time and think, if I can do this and I can do it to best effect, then I can look at what's next, and then I can think about how I do it better in a broader role with more people. And so my progression's kind of been through that ambition to be able to influence and shape and improve things for more people as I've gone through.
So just being the best that you could be in a role, then your next opportunity would tend to open up. And I guess having workplaces like the NHS, there's quite a variety. Opportunities appear all over the place, along with challenges. So if you find yourself being somebody who can, roll with the punches and sort of deal with the challenges, and then that also gives you opportunities, I'm sure. I was thinking there's an affinity in terms of charities and NHS, the people thing, the fact that, again, it's working for something that's bigger than just HR. In this, it's something that you feel has got a bigger purpose, is important.
Always. I did some recent work around motivational mapping and looking at some key drivers. And one of my biggest key drivers is about being purpose driven. And so wanting to be somewhere in an organization that I know makes a difference, in a role that I know makes a difference, are one of my biggest motivators.
And have you ever ended up in a role where that didn't feel the case? You noticed the difference?
Interestingly, when I worked for a while, I did consultancy role. I worked for a private sector organisation who provided consultancy services into health, social care, third sector. And I think, although I was able to, again, work with organisations that were purpose-driven, because my interventions were brief and I wasn't able to see the end results, I didn't find that in any way, shape or form as satisfying as I found it being part of seeing something through. And my biggest challenge came with actually being able to just go, I've come in, I've done a time-limited piece of work, and now I have to walk away and I can't see the end results. And I realised that wasn't for me.
I understand that. I identify with that. Sometimes I find that as a consultant or as an outside, it's nice when we're working with customers that we can partner with, actually, because you can then see things through and support. But it's quite frustrating when you go in and do a piece of work and go, oh, I hope they're going to do something with it. Or worse, you go in and set something up and you can see that they're not going to do anything with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's quite frustrating, isn't it? So
Yeah,
yes, I can see. So it's seeing, like, making the difference, making sure you can push things through in terms of that. So
absolutely.
I know, so you've also done a few interim roles, and I think
Yes.
that's probably a completely, well, that, yeah, how does that fit? You know, if you can go in and make a difference, or, and also what are your tips if someone's doing something, because you've got to go in and land on your feet, haven't you, in those sort
Yeah,
of situations?
absolutely you do. I mean, the interim roles were really useful for me in terms of, at a time, I'd been through, there were a number of organisational changes. So I've been in a place and space where, as we all do sometimes in our lives, we get made redundant. And so you kind of go, right, what's next? And the interim roles I've taken on have all been for kind of sort of 4, 6, 8, 9 months or so, predominantly, which has given me a really good feel for a different organization, a different way of working, but also honed some of my project management skills, which I think is one of the really key things. When it's very easy when you work in kind of people related business to be able to just kind of go, well, there's no real start and finish point to people, but actually those skills in being able to manage a project and ensure that things get implemented in a timely way with appropriate milestones and various other bits and pieces, I think are really important if you want to become a good strategic HR professional, because you need to be able to demonstrate that return on investment. You need to be able to demonstrate how you tangibly make a difference, what projects do, and what time limited interim assignments do. From that perspective, is you do have a completely different set of deliverables, and you learn how to work towards demonstrating the difference that you make within a very short space of time.
I think that's a very interesting point to put out, because I say we've all been involved in projects where the project's, you know, scope extends, and there is a validity, I think, to you know, sometimes a project may have phases, but you do need to close things down and draw a line under it and refresh, just to kind of keep on top of things. Otherwise you have the sense that you never really get anywhere.
Yeah, that scope and creep can happen, and it's really easy when you're interested in a lot of things to get distracted from what you were originally potentially aiming to do, and follow off. And then you do with the discipline that comes with doing a fixed piece of work, means you go, actually, that's outside my scope and remit. I need to keep focused on what I'm here and I've been brought in to do. Whereas when your job is a wider job, it's very easy to kind of almost disappear off some rabbit holes and go, oh no, hang on, I was supposed to be over here doing that. So it's a discipline in your mind and in your way of working that it really supported what I was trying to be able to achieve and do.
Yes, especially, and in the interim, you have got that kind of start, middle, and end. But I think having that mindset in a full-time role is actually quite a useful one, to make sure that things
definitely
are progressed and don't stall. I mean, we think it's really easy for things to get distracted. In terms of these things that you've talked about, so we talked about sort of strategic thinking, project management. I'm thinking there's probably something to do with almost adapting to different cultures in terms of your journeys. Would you say these are skills that you always had, or you've developed? And if you always had them, how did you recognize them? And if you've developed them, how have you developed them?
So it's a bit of a mixed bag, I guess, is my answer to your question there. I think some of this is about relationships and about how you build relationships quickly with people that you work with, so that you can gain that understanding. I think I've always been a person who's been able to relate. So I take from wherever I am, wherever I'm working, any of my life experiences, I take bits from them all, and I kind of put them all into my little bank. So I've got in the back of my head somewhere a zillion filing cabinets that have got lots of bits and pieces of information. So that ability to be able to relate to people and be able to go, yeah, and to just build those relationships, builds that empathy, build that understanding, is something that has grown over time as my experience has grown. So you become able to relate to different experiences people have had. I would always say I've been somebody who is particularly non-judgmental, and so that understanding of other people and that acceptance of other people and how people are. So that relationship stuff, such a technical phrase to use for a director of people of culture, that relationship stuff is something I think that I recognized the value, and I saw how that was an enabler for me quite early in my career. And it's something that I've held on to and I think has been really valuable throughout my time. In terms of some of the development, I feel I've been quite lucky, I guess, in some ways, but I've taken every opportunity that's come my way. So if somebody said, would you like a mentor? Would you like a coach? I'm like, absolutely, because there's a different perspective and a different insight people can give you. When I've had an opportunity to go on, in one of my roles, there was a wonderful program that was all about aspiring leaders. And that was great because it tried to stretch me out of my comfort zone. And I think you have to be open to that there'll be things that you might be offered an opportunity to do. You go, oh, that feels a bit uncomfortable. Embrace it with both hands. Just take the opportunities that are there. The worst that can happen is that you go, okay, maybe that wasn't right for me there. What do I learn from that? And how do I bring that again into what I do and how I do it moving forward? So I've had some great opportunities, and I was very lucky. I got to go on and do my master's in human resources, which again was very challenging in certain ways, because if I was to describe my learning style, I'm an activist pragmatist, and therefore doing a master's doesn't entirely fit with that portfolio. But I recognise that, again, to progress, I needed to challenge myself by doing things that weren't
push yourself out of the comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think if you do that and you recognise the value that can bring, and again, it's all about what's the longer term benefit of doing this. It may feel slightly torturous, as it was for me at the time, actually, but the benefit it's brought me is that there's a whole way of thinking and a viewpoint that you get that's very different. And I thrive on working with there are a couple of key figures, I think I would say, that I've worked with in my career, where I've watched very carefully how they are and how they work, and I've taken inspiration from them. And I go, where did you get that knowledge from? How did you get that? What did you do? Yeah. And just using those opportunities.
So are you asking, when you were saying where did you get that from, with that you asking the other people, or just asking yourself about them? Yeah, and
both. A bit about both, because a bit like, how did that work for them? And I've seen somebody do something similar and it didn't work. So how did that work for them? And also just having those conversations with people, go, that was really interesting what you were saying. Tell me more. Talk to me about it. And using those opportunities.
Interesting. Staying with your masters, because I think that's worth just digging into a little bit, because you did, your first degree was business studies. So I guess I'm interested in 1, 2, 3 things that are to do with this. I'll just say all 3 in case I forget them at the time, but we'll come back to it. One of them was, do you think things like the masters is relevant, if you see what I mean? Is HR changing, or was the content, the syllabus, relevant and valuable to you in your role? And secondary to that, do you think that's where the strategic piece came, or did you have it already? Because one of the things would be that where they're trying to get you to think strategically in terms of those. And I'll come back to my third one, because that's just gone out of my head. I knew I'd have 3, and now I've forgotten. So I'll come back.
That's fine. So I think the first one you asked about was about relevance. It was interesting. So do I think it's necessary now in terms of being able to progress? I think if you've got the experience, I don't think a master's is per se. When I did it, it was a few years back, and kind of qualifications were a bit of the thing at the time. And I did it because I did feel that it was standing in my way, not having had that next level of education in terms of my ambition to progress. And so I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. I had the opportunity to do it. I struggled sometimes with the theoretical elements, I guess, because people are wonderful and amazing and fabulous and unique and brilliant. And what some of the elements within it tried to do is put people in boxes. And I struggle when people are put in boxes. I don't. So I had a number of interesting / challenging conversations with my tutors where I'd be like, yeah, but I've met people where that if you do A, B, and C, they do X, not
Yeah.
D or E. And so testing those and testing that, I think actually was what was also stretching my mind as part of the process. So, I mean, there's obviously a logic behind why they put things what they put into the syllabus. Some of my strategic thinking came from there. I think some of my strategic thinking, which is onto your second point, I guess. So do I think a master's is necessary now to be able to progress to the position I'm in? No, I don't think. I think that portfolio of experience, and I think I personally place more of a value on what people know, understand, the competencies and the understanding, and that people element that people bring to a role such as mine, I value significantly more than I would value somebody who came with a whole suite of educational qualifications, because I think they can't teach you life experience and empathy. They can teach you practicality, they can teach you theories, but it's theoretical to application is really important to me.
So it is bringing both together, isn't it?
100%.
It's so key. And I suppose what it can do when you're someone who's been a practitioner, it can kind of get rid of the imposter, if you know what I mean, because you go in and do the theory, go, oh yeah, well that's what I'd have done anyway, or that doesn't make sense. But you don't feel like there's a gap that there's someone who's read the book, done the science stuff, that knows what's going on. And would you say that did you consider, I don't know if you've done CIPD as well, or did that supersede? Because I didn't do CIPD.
No, CIPD was part of CIPD, part of what I was doing. Yeah.
Okay, so it sort of ticked that at the same time.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Okay. So the strategic piece does, in terms of it, that kind. Yeah, it came through that, but also it came through, a lot of it came through practical experience of working with, boards, working with exec directors, and I was very lucky that I was on a couple of. So there's a Healthcare People Management Association, which is one of the health service related kind of. HPMA, I had an opportunity to do some work with them, and actually being part of all of that. And just it helps you when you work with other people who work in slightly different ways, just stretches your thinking as well. So that's where some of it's come from.
Absolutely. So that real breadth of being immersed in all these different ways of doing things means you can bring that forwards.
Yeah.
So amongst that raft of experience, if you were to look back at key successes / key challenges, one of each, two of each, anything that stands out that you'd be happy to share?
Oh, so one of the biggest learnings I had really early on in my career was, and it's something I still tell people about in training sessions that sometimes I run, was about making sure that if you've got whether you love them, hate them, policies and procedures that are your own. It was related to an employment tribunal, and basically I was involved in an investigation process where the nature of the issue was significant, and we wanted to progress and deal with it really quickly because there were potential implications, and as such, we didn't 100% follow the process that we had written. The person that ended up being dismissed took us to tribunal, and we ended up losing. We didn't have to reinstate them, but we ended up in a position where we had compromised the efficacy of that particular case. And it has stuck in my head for all these years that if you've got a process, you must follow it, whether you think it's the best process or the worst. And what you do is you go back and you change that process afterwards, and you improve it and you learn. But that bit about making sure you are doing the right things in the right way so that you get the right result at the end is something that's always stuck with me. Always.
Yeah, that's an interesting learn, isn't it? And also, therefore, I suppose there's a bit about, if you think the processes are rubbish, don't ignore them, just sort them out.
100%. Don't look at things and go, that doesn't feel right, that doesn't sound right, and then just let it slide, because ultimately it may well be something that you end up using and go, oh, if only I'd done.
Yeah.
So use those opportunities to make the difference.
Repent at leisure, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It was one of the biggest. And I guess one of the things that I've learned is the value of every individual that you have an interaction with in any organization. So some of my best learnings about how an organizational culture works are from when I used to talk to the hospital porters, or talking to the cleaners, but it's at all levels, and different people have such different perspectives. You learn so much from just taking the time and placing a value on those interactions and those conversations, where you go, they'll come with something completely different. I wonder what they can tell me, particularly when you've got people who go around all of the different parts of it, component parts of an organization. They hear so much, and yet not many people ask them. And I was part of a program once called In Your Shoes, where we took the time to listen to what people's day-to-day life was like. What were some of their challenges? What were some of their joys and successes? And actually helping people work some of that through. So that value that comes from every individual, and what they can bring, and how they can help educate you around what can make a difference.
I mean, that's a really interesting one, just in terms of being open, being humble, and also getting a sense of a true culture of an organisation as to what's going on. So listening to people at all levels all of the time, so you never know when that's really going to come in handy.
Absolutely. And putting yourself out there, is, in a sense, there's almost a little bit of vulnerability that you put out to go, I in my position, I will happily say to people, I don't know what you know, and I want you to help educate me, because the more I understand what you know, the better I understand how I help and support you. So educate me, tell me.
I mean, it's interesting that in terms of someone who's a senior manager, such as yourself, to go down and spend time with others, I think that is invaluable. Creating that time, it has a really positive impact on others. But it is interesting because people think, oh, someone who's senior is supremely confident. It actually takes a level of comfort with yourself, and confidence to be able to go and do that, because you've got to be able to make the sort of chit chat and just sort of be on a level with people, haven't you? So that's I can see why that's powerful.
It is, and it's amazing.
So I suppose, go on, sorry.
No, I was going to say, one of the other learnings, I guess, that I've had is, if I think about things that I've done in the past, is I've never asked a member of my team, unless it's something technical that I don't have the expertise to do anything I wouldn't do myself. So, if we've got 400 letters that we needed to get out, I would sit and stuff envelopes with my team, so that, I'm not asking them. But equally, when you get into more senior positions, or you get into different positions within an organization, don't also try and do the work that others should be doing. Utilize the people that are around you, make the most of those opportunities. They bring something wonderful, and they bring some technical skills, and don't think you need to know everything. And also, don't do other people's jobs for them, because so
that's an interesting one. So what you're saying is the difference between sort of micromanaging. So it's empowering you, and it's showing that I value you, and I'm not superior by getting my sleeves rolled up, but equally getting out of people's way and not trying to do everything. So freeing up your time and let people do the jobs that you've brought them in to do.
Said significantly more eloquently than I did just then, Lucinda. Thank you very much.
People stuff. People stuff. So just finally then, Jeanette, in terms of your advice to yourself, is there anything that we haven't covered so far? If you were to look back and give yourself some top tips when you were starting out, what would they be?
Every opportunity that people offer you to learn and to understand, don't ever think that you can't learn something new, that you can't discover something new about yourself and about the people that you're working with. And don't ever assume that you'll make everybody happy. When you work in a people-related profession, you have to be prepared for the fact that despite your want to make a difference and your liking predominantly of people, there will be people that you will never make happy. And if you beat yourself up about that as you go through your career, you will doubt yourself and that ultimate bigger difference that you can make.
I think that's a really interesting point actually to end on. So you can be sort of people oriented and people centric and want the best for people, but that doesn't mean you allow your sense of worth to be dictated by people. It doesn't make you a pushover. And it also almost reinforces that importance of the policies. If you've got that kind of anchoring of the policies and the principles.
And sometimes you have to make tough decisions, because they're the right decisions for the majority of people, even though they may have an impact on the minority of people. But if they're the right decision, they're the right decision, and not to, get too tied up in knots internally about that, because you cannot keep everybody happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, pragmatic in terms of that view, in terms of doing the right thing in the pragmatic way. That's wonderful. Thank you, Jeanette. It's been a pleasure having you on the HR Uprising podcast. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for your time as well. Much appreciated.
I really hope you found this week's episode useful and enjoyable. If you did, perhaps you could recommend us to a friend or colleague, or give us a review on your platform of choice. It really helps new listeners to find us. Now, you can access links to any of the information mentioned in this show via the website www.hruprising.com. Further free resources are also available at www.actus.co.uk. There you can also find out more about our software and training solutions. Finally, why not join our LinkedIn group, the HR Uprising, to share ideas and collaborate with other like-minded people professionals. Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast.